Hey, Chris.
Hey, Tom.
How's it going?
Good.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, happy to.
So you have a presentation? You have a presentation, Chris?
Yeah, I've got a handful of slides. It looks like I have sharing ability, so I'll just launch it. Yeah, I'll just follow mine for you.
Okay. There we go. Still got a few joining in, but good to see everybody. How's everyone doing today? Oh, I like your screen there, Seth. That's nice. Very custom.
That's positive visualization.
I know, you should do that. You should do that like when you're talking to a NSF program manager, right? Put that up there. That's pretty slick. You'll have to show us how to do that.
OBS player. It's what all the Twitch streamers use.
Oh, okay. I'm just not up on that stuff, you know. I got to catch up. Yeah. My backgrounds are too boring, I guess.
The best is I can be on brand during my talks.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's what it's all about, right? It's all about the branding. All right, well, it's 2 minutes after. It looks like Jen Funk is just joining us, so that's perfect. Thanks everyone for, oh, we lost her, it looks like. We had her and then we lost her. I'll go ahead and start and Jen hopefully will be, oh, there you are. Hi, Jen.
Hi.
Thanks everyone for joining us to talk about NSF Career. It's good to see everyone, and hopefully next time we do this, we can do it in person actually and not have to continue to do Zoom meetings like this. But NSF Career is, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Tom Piota, Vice President for Research. NSF Career is actually one of my favorite programs. I'm really happy that Dr. Jennifer Funk and Dr. Christopher Kim are able to join us today also. They are previous NSF Career awardees. I was an NSF Career awardee back in 2003. And NSF Career, you know, we're going to talk some about kind of what it is and tips for you all to be successful if you apply for an NSF Career, why you might do that. But if I think about, I got it back in 2003. But if I think about kind of what it meant to me as a faculty member at that time, it certainly propelled me in my research program. I did research on droughts in the Southwest and Pacific Rim countries. So it certainly propelled me in my research program, allowed me to get involved in a lot bigger projects after that. Also, I was involved in a $20 million NSF project after that. And I think career really helped me set me up for success. But I think certainly on the educational side, the students that I think now that were involved with me, whether were undergrads or graduate students, it really allowed for that development and working with them to kind of see and now, you know, they're successful, whether they're faculty or in the private sector. So I think back to it and it had a big impact. And I think that's NSF's interest in this. It's to fund and support early career faculty and set them up for a success in the future. And they know that you as a faculty member have a lot of roles, and what does it take to support all that you do as a faculty member. Before I go into my presentation, maybe we can, because we don't have a real large group, do quick introductions and maybe your interest in career. And I'm going to start with Chris and Jennifer, and maybe you can tell us your kind of, I know they're going to present some, but maybe a quick snapshot on the impact of career on you also. So Jennifer, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, so my background is in plant ecology, and yeah, I guess I don't really know what to say. But yeah, so I had a career in a grant in 2013 is when it started, and it was fantastic. I was able to engage students both in my courses and a high school program, which I'll talk to you about in a little bit. And yeah, I definitely think that the experience of writing the NSF was really a good one and did propel me. A lot of the stuff you were saying, Tom, I really very much agreed with as well. So anyway, that's an introduction for me.
Thanks, Jen. And Chris.
Yeah, thanks. You might hear some kids screaming in the background. Apologies. It's a fun
We've all gotten used to
Wednesday,
that.
you know. Yeah, so hi, my name is Chris Kim. I'm a professor in the Schmid College of Science and Technology. I'm a geoscientist by training, geochemist, and so my proposal was on a geochemistry project. And I'll say that I have a couple of experiences. One was writing this career award, and I'll talk about this in the few slides that I have, in the context of Chapman, which was, I submitted my proposal, I got funded in 2009. So I like to say that my career ended in 2014. So my career was over as of 2014. So writing it in the context of being palatable to outside reviewers who didn't understand Chapman was the most important part, I think, of writing that proposal so that it got funded. But it certainly kickstarted a whole different area of research that I was moving towards, but kind of opened up the doors to do a lot of different things, and also to do it with a 5-year time horizon, which was really helpful, as you might all imagine, reducing the stress of trying to patch together smaller amounts of funding. It just gave me this big amount of runway that I think I'm probably still drafting off of to some degree. But yeah, it was quite helpful. And it also allowed me to establish better ties with students also at Orange High School, at Troy Tech High School, as well as other high school teachers, AP environmental science high school teachers who I also worked with as part of the proposal. So thanks.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And I'll just go around then, if you want to quickly introduce yourself and maybe just any kind of what your interest is in career. Seth, I'll go ahead and start with you since you have the coolest background.
Well, that's the thing. It's not a background. I can go behind it. Yeah, I'm Seth Benzel. I'm just finished my first year here at Argyris. I'm in the Information Systems Management Science Department. And I think the NSF grant that I will propose will be generally in the idea of studying social media network effects and modeling evolution and participation in social media.
Great. Tom Springer, you want to go next? Not sure.
Sure. I'm from the Fowler School of Engineering. This is going on to finish my second year. So my research topics are basically real-time embedded systems, autonomous systems, stuff like that. So they kind of the idea that I'd like to set up a laboratory that is hardware in the loop, software in the loop integration. So you could use virtualization as well as hardware and software components to do research in autonomous systems, image processing, image recognition, those kind of things.
Great, thanks, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
And I will probably mispronounce your name, but Zhuzhen Wen?
Yes, Yuxin. Hello, everyone. Okay. My name is Yuxin. I'm an assistant professor in Fowler School of Engineering. So I just joined Chapman, has been a year, almost a year. So my research interesting focus on deep learning, data analysis for degradation modeling, manufacturing, and also I want to apply my research to the healthcare. I'm so glad to meet you all. Thank you.
All right. Polona, you want to go next?
Okay, yes. Hi, I'm Polona. I'm finishing my first year at Chapman, so I'm an assistant professor in mathematics at Schmidt College. So I'm just generally curious about this career proposal. I don't have any particular questions at this point.
Great.
So the research I'm doing is in theoretical mathematics, Fourier analysis. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Polona. Jason, you want to go next?
Yes, thanks, Tom. Hi, everybody. My name is Jason Douglas. I'm assistant professor of public health in the Department of Health Sciences, Crean College. And my research broadly concerns social and environmental determinants of public health disparities. So I investigate a range of challenges that compromise community health. Everything from looking at neighborhood level conditions, for example, public parks, access to public parks and how that associates with compromised health and well-being, to exposure to air pollution in low-income communities and communities of color, to examining adverse childhood experiences and neighborhood correlates of those experiences. Nice to meet everybody.
All right, thanks, Jason. Brent, you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Brent Harper in the Department of Physical Therapy, and I just sort of want to learn a little bit more about what NSF has to offer for some of my research topics, which would be concussion, chronic ankle instability, looking at injury risk and prevention, and to improve quality of life, et cetera.
Great. Thanks, Brent. Mark?
I apologize if my audio is static and don't have my normal conference headset with me today. But my name's Mark. I'm finishing up my second year in Ballard School of Engineering. My research is on devices, primarily small devices, and I'm using them for.
We can barely hear you, Mark.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Maybe a chat intro might make
Yeah,
more
you
sense.
might need to do a chat intro. Sorry about that. Allegra?
Hi, everyone. I just finished my third year at Chapman. I'm a synthetic chemist. I'm not planning to apply for career this year, but I'm planning to next summer, but I want to plan out a bit more. I'm planning to apply for like a regular NSF grant in the fall though. So I just sort of wanted to start thinking about both. And yeah, my research is focused on synthesizing new molecules and catalysts for more efficient organic chemistry or plastic synthesis.
Great. Matt?
Hi, my name is Matt Leifer. I'm assistant professor in physics. I'm actually in my 5th year at Chapman. This will be my 3rd attempt to obtain NSF funding, but my 1st attempt at career. My research is in foundations of quantum mechanics and in quantum information and quantum computing.
Great. Raul?
Hello, everyone. I'm Rahul Songra. I'm a biomedical engineer. I work in Department of Physical Therapy, and my research interest focuses on gait and posture biomechanics using wearable sensors to assess fall risk. Nice to meet everyone.
Angel? Hey.
Hello, good afternoon. Great to see everyone. I'm Angel Miles Nash. I am an assistant professor in the Masters of Leadership Development in the Atala College of Educational Studies. My research emphasis are on providing equitable access to STEM education, especially for historically underserved populations with the concentration and growth of color. Thank you.
Great. Greg, you want to go next?
I'm Greg Goldsmith. I'm just finished my 4th year in Schmidt College of Science and Technology, and my lab studies fluxes of carbon and water through the world's forests.
Thanks, Greg. And it looks like Minju did her chat introduction, so thank you, Minju. And then Nassim, you want to go next?
Sure. Okay, I just joined. I don't know actually.
Okay, we put you on the spot.
I'm Nassim. I'm an assistant professor in electrical engineering. I just finished. I'm finishing my 1st year, and my research interests are in metamaterials, which are artificial photonic materials, and I am using machine learning to design these metamaterials for sensing and controlling optical forces.
Great, thanks. And then we have several people here from Office of Research and Wilkinson. I'll let them introduce themselves also. Megan, you want to go first?
Sure, thanks, Tom. Hi, everybody. I'm Megan Faulkner. I'm a research administrator. So Molly and I sort of handle the pre-award and non-financial post-award side of things. And so I work a lot with some of you already, but to those of you that I don't know, I assist with things like helping to develop grant proposals and the submissions to whatever sponsor, whether it's NSF or NIH or other things, and kind of here to answer your questions and help you along with the process, and also helping out with some of the non-financial post-award pieces.
All right. And Molly, you want to go next?
Yeah, so yes, that's what we do for you there in our research administrator role, both pre-award help and post-award non-administrative things, help you keep your grant moving throughout the timeline. I've been here for 4 years now.
Great, thanks, Molly. And Allison, you want to go?
Sure. I'm Allison DeVries. I'm from Wilkinson College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, and I have an increasing number of faculty that are looking at the NSF for both larger institutional awards, but then also for careers. So I'm interested to see how NSF fits into the non-STEM disciplines.
Great. Well, thank you. And I know that took a little bit of time, but it's always good for kind of orient everyone kind of who's there, and you never know, you might end up working with each other in the future. That's what comes out of these things sometimes. So I'm going to say a few things. Chris will share some thoughts, and Jennifer will also. So I'm going to jump right into this. And then we certainly want to allow a lot of time for you all to ask questions of us. This is your opportunity. And feel free to post questions into the chat. We can either try to answer those in real time, or we'll have time set aside, because we'll try to get through these presentations pretty quick. But this was about offering some tips for success for NSF Career. You know, it's good to hear that some are thinking about submitting this year. It's coming up soon. But, you know, in reality, some of you may be thinking next year or the future years. So it's good to start thinking about these things now. I like to put up numbers because people always want to know how much money is available at NSF. Well, there's your program breakdowns, and all of you will, one of the most really important things is to figure out which program should you apply to in NSF. And I'll talk some about that, but this is where the funding resides in all those different programs. NSF is at a historic high, take away the 1 year where they had the Recovery Act, but it's an historic high for funding that they have. And in fact, this coming fiscal year, or for the next budget cycle, they've asked to increase that up to 10 billion. So a lot's being put behind science right now. That's the good news. The challenging piece of that is everyone else sees those same numbers. So everyone else is competing for those dollars, and a lot of people are submitting proposals. Success rates, you know, they really vary from program to program, but in general, and this is program-wide in all the proposals that go to NSF, the green line being early faculty, the purple line being later career faculty. The funding success rates vary somewhere between 20, could be as high as 30%. I'll show you some other numbers later. So it's competitive, but it's not 10%, so that's the good thing. And the other thing I like to tell people is, because I've been on review panels and others have been on review panels, a lot of times if you take the time and submit a really strong proposal, you've already increases your chances a lot. I think what you don't want to do is feel the pressure of just submitting a proposal because you feel the pressure of submitting a proposal. What NSF, if you ask an NSF program manager when's a good time to submit a proposal, they'll tell you when it's ready. And I think that's when they want you to submit the proposal, is when you think it's ready and it's strong, and that'll increase your funding success rate. So what is NSF Career? We talked some about it in terms of it's supporting pre-tenure faculty. So that's one of the eligibility requirements. And an important piece here, you know, you're all at different stages. Even if you're close to being tenure, as long as you submit it before you're granted tenure, you're eligible. So that's an important thing to remember also, is right up to that time that you're given tenure, you can still submit the NSF Career. It's available for all directorates, and you'll need to figure out and talk to the program managers in terms of which directorate would you be in. This year, the proposals are due in July, and typically they're due in that time period. Last year, they bumped it a little bit because of COVID, but that's the time period. When I think back to my NSF Career proposal, and I'm happy to share it with any of you, because, you know, I think it's always good to look at others. You know, it's really kind of three pieces to it. It's really two functional pieces to it, but introductions to the proposals are really important because they kind of introduce your research, and a lot of times that you can get people's attention on the first page of a proposal. The other thing that I was given advice by people that read my proposal is, and it's an important in an NSF Career proposal, is you need to be able to show that you're the person that's well positioned to do this work. What's your expertise? The way someone put it to me, it takes a little bit of bragging, and I know none of us like bragging about ourselves, but what are some of those early accomplishments that you can highlight that make you well positioned to be an NSF Career awardee? And bringing some of that out in the right way is really important. The research, you know, it's not a 15-page NSF proposal. Think of it more of, because NSF careers are a research and an education plan, and I'll talk some about the importance of integrating those, but you shouldn't just have 13 pages of, or 14 pages of research and then try to tack on a small educational piece. I don't think they would see that as you looking at what you do as a faculty member and developing your career, because your responsibilities reside in those blue and green boxes. So concisely presenting research ideas, preliminary data is always good to be able to present because you've done some preliminary work maybe. And then what's the appropriate way to use charts and tables to kind of bring that work out, or the research approach that you're presenting. Education plans. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but I think you want to be able to show some general understanding of what are high impact practices, whether that's undergraduate research or service learning, or what is it that you want to be able to help or involvement of high school students. What is it that you want to be able to include in there, and why is it in a high impact practice also? And then think about kind of leveraging existing resources. You don't have to reinvent some programs. Chapman, for instance, has a Center for Undergraduate Excellence, which Chris Kim's involved with the summer research program. Can you leverage onto some programs which makes your program look even stronger then? Other ingredients for strong proposals. Obviously, NSF reviews it around merit and broader impacts. When I say well-written proposal, so at 12 o'clock, I was just on a call with an NSF program manager for one of our other faculty members. And this was actually one of her comments was, it wasn't that it was a badly written proposal, but the proposal was written such that the people, the group that was writing it, they really understood it well, but a little broader group, maybe people within their expertise, but that weren't so close to it, they probably just didn't get it. So writing it in a way where a little broader group and a broader audience can really understand what you're proposing is really important, because review panels are diverse, and you need to be able to bring out what it is you're proposing, sometimes to experts that may not be in your field. The integration of research and education plan that is feasible. What I mean by that is don't try to be too ambitious. I've actually seen that in reviewer comments and reviewer panels where someone was really excited and they just presented something that was just way too ambitious. You know, I'm going to redo the curriculum, so research is in every class. Well, that's just too ambitious. You know, you're an assistant professor. That's not what you can't do something like that. So what's a feasible way of integrating your research and education plan? I'll talk some about the department letter, but that's really important to show your institutional commitment. And then if you have collaborators, but realize that you're the PI on this, you can't have co-PIs, but you can have people that have an interest in your research and they can weigh in terms of this work being important in the way you collaborate in the future. But you can be the only PI on this, and you have to be able to show that. But sometimes if people from the outside may have an interest in your work, there's ways to kind of bring in that support and collaboration. And then a budget that's consistent with your activities. Align your activities with the budget. And in general, they're about $400,000 to $500,000 over a 5-year period. And part of that depends on the directorate that you're applying to. Department letter. So it's, how is the department going to commit to those PI activities? Is it your workload and the course load that you take on, and how they can how that fits into the research that you'll be able to conduct, and how do your career goals that you're doing as a faculty member align with the institutional mission is important. Are there other professional development and mentoring activities that are already built into the school that are available? And then it's also just a eligibility statement from the department that you're non-tenure at the time of proposal submission. And then just other tips, I look at this from a 6-month timeline, 3 to 6 month timeline, where as a faculty member, you should really be starting to think about it 6 months out in terms of understanding the program announcement, potentially reaching out to a program manager with your idea with a short summary. As you get closer, if you haven't contacted the program manager, contact them. Some of it starts, when I think about my time writing the NSF career proposal, I had to just dedicate time to proposal writing. If you don't dedicate that time, it's hard to get it done in a way where you'll be able to have others look at it. And then, you have support here at Chapman in sponsored project services, contacting them so they know that this is going to be submitted and they can start some of the activities in our office to be able to get it submitted in time. As you get closer, 1 month out, I think about mine. I'd finished a first draft of mine 1 month and I sent it to colleagues for review. And these weren't necessarily technical colleagues. One was a former NSF program manager. One was an NSF career awardee outside of my discipline. And they gave me really great feedback, and it gave me time to revise my proposal and have a better proposal that was finally submitted. You'll want to be finalizing your budget at that time, and then ensuring you have any letters that you're getting from outside people, including your chair. And then 1 to 2 weeks before those final revisions, you're going to be asked for suggested reviewers. That's really important to think about. Who are the right reviewers for your proposal, and having that list ready, and starting to upload materials and just ensuring everything's there in the proposal submission. You don't want it to be kicked back for administrative reasons. And then just one last thing, if you get accepted, great, you're off and running, but certainly look at those reviews and see how it might change what you propose. If you get rejected, you wouldn't be the first, and you have a chance to submit 3 times. So and this is another thing I just heard the NSF program manager say, you should think about addressing the comments, but don't do it in the same way that we might do when we're writing like a journal paper. You don't have to address them point by point, because remember, you're going to get the second time and third time you submit it, it's a different panel and it's different reviewers. So those revisions should be incorporated into the narrative in a way where it strengthens the proposal. You're the expert in it, and you should know the right way to incorporate those revisions. And then just other common reasons that proposals don't ever end up getting reviewed, and hopefully you never fall into this category. You might accidentally list a co-investigator. Don't do that. Department letter is missing. Make sure you got that. Don't miss a deadline. We hate when that happens. Proposal might not be an appropriate topic. Sometimes this happens, and I know we have some people in the health areas here. Sometimes someone may say, well, that's an NIH funded proposal. This is where you want to make sure you're talking to the program manager and make sure that it's an appropriate topic for NSF. And then just other sections that might be missing, prior support or the data management plan. You don't want those things missing. So those are my tips. I'm going to hand it over to Chris now to share some of his thoughts. I'll stop sharing here.
Great. Are people seeing my screen right now?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm just gonna kind of piggyback on some of Tom's suggestions and either amplify them or give some specific examples. I kind of organize this in just sort of my top thoughts, some of which might be a little redundant, but I can give a little spin on them perhaps. I mentioned earlier that it's going to be really important to characterize and explain to the average reviewer who's not likely to be familiar with Chapman what Chapman is, how it's structured, how it's still primarily an undergraduate institution. Now we're able to say that we are an R2, Carnegie classified research institution, which I think is an asset for career proposals, but certainly you'll still need to expend maybe more time and energy than you would think you would have to explaining how you are going to structure your research to work within the resources that your institution has, that your college has, what types of students you'll be working with, how are you going to manage those students, what track record you already have working with those students, and then what instrumentation, software, database access you have, or what collaborators might you be working with to obtain that content. And the reason I sort of spend some time on this bullet point is, at least from my personal experience, and maybe it's now outdated, I would hope, there was broad lack of awareness of Chapman University by the reviewers, and therefore I needed to explain it to them very carefully. And in the absence of explaining that, they would make some assumptions. Those assumptions would typically be, you can't do that type of work at your institution. Or I don't see how you're going to get that work done in your institution. Or legitimately, in my earliest proposals, you are overly ambitious in the scope of what you're trying to do at your institution. So I sort of had to do a mixture of making my stuff realistic, scale and scope wise and structure wise. So I had to explain how I work with undergraduates, but that's okay because I have the research scaffolded out in these semester long or academic year long increments, and that students would be passing on that information to other students, and we would be building the results that way. Because I think the default reviewer perspective is going to be, you need graduate students to do that work, and you need the same people to do that work over all 5 years or 3 or 4 years to do that. So I think you need to expend some energy up front laying the table, basically, for people to understand what Chapman is and how you think you can be successful at Chapman. The second one was one that Tom brought up, is to communicate with your program director and establish a relationship with them ideally. A lot of program directors stay in those roles for quite a long stretch, and so you might have a decades-long relationship with some of them, as I have with one of the program directors I work with. And they actually, it is in their job description to communicate with potential grant recipients. So email conversations, phone conversations, meeting them at conferences, back when we had conference in person. That's all part of their job requirement, actually. And so you shouldn't feel certainly shy about doing that. But reach out to them. A common response or a common way to introduce yourself is to talk about the research you do and what you're interested in, what specific area of funding for the NSF you're interested in, and maybe a brief description of that work. And then, in my experience anyway, they often might request you to write a one-pager summary that they can look at and digest and reflect on before they initiate that phone conversation or something with you. But this is a very important part because that program director has the ultimate recommendation, which supersedes that of the reviewers, the reviewing panel, in terms of who gets recommended for support. Tom mentioned before, if you ever have the opportunity to serve as a reviewer, to serve on a review panel, that both lets you see a lot of examples of successful proposals, it lets you see a lot of examples of unsuccessful proposals, and it puts you in a community of people who can also potentially, you could identify as possible reviewers for your own proposals, because you're likely working in the same field. So this is something you can, again, offer to your program director in your email, include your CV and say, I'd be happy to serve on a review panel. They're always starved for reviewers, especially younger reviewers, I think. So it's a great way to kind of build that relationship further. Tom had mentioned this also, just to put a lot of time and thought into articulating what the broader impacts are of your work, right? One of the 2 pillars of the NSF criteria, and specifically how that relates to the educational component, any broader outreach planning, and partnerships with either local high schools, science museums, nonprofits, others that you are going to use to sort of build out the educational component of your career proposal. So this part, yeah, again, there's a lot of standard ways to do this, and those standard ways are so standard now, they're actually not very impressive anymore. You can't say, I'm going to train students and they're going to present at conferences and they're going to be co-authors on papers. that's almost the baseline level of broader impacts anyone would expect. And so that should probably occupy one sentence of your proposal, and then several pages, a couple pages from there, really building out something that's more structured and more involved. For mine, in addition to working with specific high schools to bring in high school students in a structured way over the summers, I also organized several release days, as we called them, where we had funding to basically pay for substitute teachers for high school AP environmental science teachers, who would then spend that day at Chapman listening to current college students talking about their experiences at Chapman and their experiences in sciences and what high school skills were helpful to them. Part of it involved me giving a couple of kind of lectures and hands-on demos on topics that had to do with this actual proposal, so they could learn about that work. And then part of it was them actually then doing some experiments on a kind of scaled back basis, and then using that to develop their own lesson plans to bring back to their classrooms. And if anyone's interested, of course, I'm happy to share my proposal so you can see at least the outlines of how the ideas of that part of the proposal. The key one here, work closely with all of our friends and colleagues in Office of Research to make sure that you meet all the compliance requirements. They've got all the eagle eyes to check your budget to make sure things are falling within the rules closely, and will save you from a potentially catastrophic failure to format something correctly or to include your current and pending research or funding and so forth. That would just be an immediate dagger to your proposal. And then finally, as Tom mentioned, for resubmissions, I really make sure you consider carefully and address all the comments that you can. And I always find that resubmissions represent the best opportunity. I enjoy revising proposals much better than writing them, because I feel like it's a chance to actually improve something and to make something better and to find the soft spots that others have identified and really strengthen them. So I am a big fan of resubmissions. And it's probably not a surprise that most of my fun, successful proposals have been resubmissions and not their initial submissions. And I've found some old data. I was looking around preparing for this talk that showed, this is quite a, maybe 10 years old now though, that resubmission funding support rates, award rates are roughly comparable to first time award rates, but there's a lot of people that drop out that don't actually revise and resubmit. So I think your odds are good if you get in there. So I know that personally, and then statistically, there's maybe some evidence that resubmission, generally provides you a better chance of getting funding because you're improving something from the year before. Okay, so then some quick tips here. I have found that every time I include a flow chart in my plans, my proposal, then I get funded. And every time I have not submitted a flow chart because I wasn't thinking about it, I forgot, I actually did not get funded. So in my resubmissions, I include flow charts now. And these are 3 examples. The one for the career award is in the center there. These are not beautiful, certainly, but they help take 10 pages of text and allow somebody to kind of follow along and see how you're connecting pieces to one another. This is a standard format now, right? People always put timelines in the proposals, so this is not particularly novel, but having this also shows the level of thought you put into the sequence of things you're going to do and what form you're going to do them. And then just formatting your proposal in a way that makes it more legible and less blocky, solid text, the better. So I tend to employ, this is actually not even the best example, but it just shows where I have the key hypothesis sort of boxed out, and then I have the specific sort of tasks or objectives kind of laid out in a separate box. And all those things, just when I read it, makes me more willing to even read it myself when I'm editing it than when I'm faced with a full page of solid text. And I just hunted around a little bit. I'll send these slides, I'll throw these slides in the chat right now. I'm sure Tom will make them available later. But I did find a webinar, a very recent webinar on just the logistics of submitting it, which I'm hopeful will be something that the Office of Research would probably actually know all this stuff, but you could watch that and just get some tips there. There's a good section on FAQs for people submitting between years 2020 and 2025. And then I have my own proposal. I'm happy for anybody who emails me to send it around. I will admit that I submitted in 2008. So whatever version of Microsoft Word was the de rigueur at that time is sort of how it looks. So it's not the flashiest, it barely has color in it, but it was fun to do. So, all right, that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions that come up either now or later or in the chat.
All right, thanks, Chris. And I'm gonna let Jennifer say a few words, and then we'll go to kind of Q&A for everybody. And thanks for those of you that are already posting some stuff in the chat. So Jennifer, you want to say a few words?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just follow up on some of the points you've already made. So I think when I proposed this in 2013, I essentially proposed to do a cure, right? A course undergraduate research experiences, but it wasn't even called a cure then. But basically what I proposed to do is like have my students in my lab classes out in the field collecting these data, getting hands-on experience. But that is like everybody's doing that now. Like, so all the colleagues at R1s have like figured out what a cure is, and now they're doing that. So, and Chris was saying you really have to go above and beyond just incorporating research into your classes and getting students into the lab to help with the research. So what I started was a high school program where I had students from nearby Orange High School come over, and they worked anywhere between 20 to 40 hours a year. And they did work in the lab. And I think NSF really likes this because there's evidence that having these longer term experiences are actually more impactful than just doing like a weekend experience, or having students into your lab for 4 hours or something like that. So having these kind of semester-long, year-long experiences is valuable. And I think there's even more evidence suggesting that getting students engaged at the K through 12 level is actually more impactful than working with undergraduates. So I think NSF really likes these sorts of outreach programs. And I actually put in $2,600 a year into my budget, and I actually hired a psychology grad student to supervise the students, because that's a lot of time that I didn't want to spend like working one-on-one with students in the lab, and minors have to be supervised when they're on campus. And also it looks great because you're giving mentoring opportunities for a graduate student as well. So there are creative ways that you can talk about education at different levels. So K through 12, undergrad, and even at the graduate level. Because in biology, we don't have a graduate program, so relying on psych grad students was helpful. But yeah, I think that the most recent panel I was on, 2 of the career proposals were proposing to engage local Girl Scout troops. So oftentimes you can just piggyback on, you don't have to create your own program. You can essentially reach out to a group that already has some sort of organization framework and just say, can I have your your students come over into the lab? Like, how can I work with you to meet some of the goals you're trying to achieve? So that way you wouldn't have to invent the wheel yourself. I do just want to say that talking to your program officer on the phone is really helpful. So I actually got funded the 3rd time on my career proposal. The first time I got it's too ambitious, you're not going to be able to do all this stuff at Chapman. It's the same kind of stuff that Chris encountered. The second time, the reviewers had an issue with my design. So I got on the phone with the program director, and he was basically like, change these things. You should use this. Like, he basically heard what was going on in the room, and that all those comments didn't make it into the reviewer comments. So talking to him immediately after I got the decision, when it was still fresh in his mind, was really helpful. And I changed it and I got funded. So I think, I don't think there might be a limit to what the program officer can do in an email. So getting them on the phone, I think, is really helpful. And then I think the last thing that I want to say is that this book is really amazing. I don't know if any of you have ever seen it before. It's writing an NSF proposal, effective NSF proposal.
Yeah, one thing you need your, sorry.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I don't know. So I feel like Tom's office should just buy everybody this book. And I have gotten 5 of my last 6 major federal grants funded since I used the approach in this book. What I really like is that there's a whole chapter on like that first page. And Tom said this, the first page is really important, and the layout of that, because it's a 15-page proposal. And so if you need to engage the reviewer really early on. And sometimes I'll spend an entire day on my first sentence. And I can remember, I've memorized the first sentences of my last like 5 grant proposals, because I thought this is going to catch the reader's attention. So I strongly recommend getting this book. And then also, I would recommend waiting until your 4th year to submit it. You don't want to submit something that's just half-baked. You have plenty of time. Chapman, the tenure clock, we're actually like a year after most other universities. Most other universities, they go up at the end of their 5th year, I think. So there's plenty of time to do it. So don't rush something. Make sure you have something that's ready before you submit it. All right, those are my thoughts.
Can you post the title of that book into the chat?
Yes.
That'd be great. Thank you, Jennifer and Chris. Those are great, great feedback. And so I'm going to ask you all, what questions do you guys have for us? That's a lot of information to take in. Yeah. Matt, go ahead.
So I have a question about this relationship with the program manager. So I'm in a slightly unusual situation. I've decided to apply to the Science and Technology Studies program because I want to do a proposal in the Foundations of Physics, and I think there's a stronger chance of it getting funded. So I've had I've written to the program director a couple of times for other things. I wrote to him about this particular proposal with a one-pager, and I'm just wondering how to interpret the comments I got back, because it's very terse, right? So he just says the STS program supports proposals in the history and philosophy of science and in social studies of science. Work in the philosophical foundations of quantum theory is a subfield of philosophy of science. So your proposal idea certainly fits with the STS program goals. That's it. That's the entire email.
Yeah,
so, I don't know how to interpret that as a positive or as a negative.
Yeah, I think Chris posted it into the chat, and I think it's really important. I mean, this has been my experience in talking with program managers. I think you get way more out of it when you actually follow that up with a phone conversation, if they're willing to have a phone conversation. Because my experience is, as you get farther and farther into a phone conversation, and you have to be prepared. You can't just go into it and expect them to kind of lead the conversation, but you have specific questions in terms of clarifying kind of what they said. I have always been surprised with what NSF program managers will tell you over the phone, but they won't necessarily tell you that in an email exchange, because I think they're a lot freer to kind of speak over the phone with you. So I think it's worth kind of doing that, following that initial kind of introduction through emails and following that up with a phone conversation to further clarify kind of what they mean by that. I don't know what Chris and Jennifer might say around that.
Yeah, I agree. The phone conversation, and I think program directors are actually required to communicate with potential awardees, which includes over the phone. I've never had anyone decline to talk on the phone, although it might be a little hard to get scheduled with them, but you should get on the phone quickly, and they often can be much more candid on the phone because that's not tracked in the same way as emails.
Yeah. What other questions do you have? Angel.
Yes, I'd be curious to hear from Chris and Jennifer what they found to be the most rewarding aspect of completing or facilitating their award processes, and what they found to be the most challenging. Like once they got it, what during that 5-year period was most rewarding and most challenging?
Jennifer, you want to start?
Sure. So writing proposals is my favorite part of being a scientist. I absolutely love it because you can just like be all speculative and just come up with all this creative stuff and write these. I don't do flow charts. I do lots of these kind of like, well, I don't know, maybe they are flow charts, but they're kind of like theoretical framework figures. I really love that. That's like my favorite part. My least favorite part, the most challenging part of like writing a proposal is like getting all the documents done, the data management plans and like the mentoring plans and all of that. It's they're just, I'm trying to make those exciting. It's very challenging, and I don't like doing that part. By far the most rewarding thing I have done as a scientist is this high school program that was part of my career, which seems terrible because I feel like at Chapman University, you're supposed to say, working with undergrads has been a great, but like having high school students in the lab who are just happy to just like grind leaf samples for 20 hours. And like you do a post survey and they're like, I can see myself being a scientist. Like it was really awesome to be on a college campus and doing research, you know, that the National Science Foundation is funding. Like, I don't know. And I learned so much about like how to frame my science, like talking to high school students. And by far, that was just the most rewarding thing I've done.
Thank you.
I would say I'm not as much a fan of writing proposals, but I am, as I mentioned before, a fan of revising proposals because, especially the career panels tend to give you 6 or so reviews. And so that's a lot of content to really dig into. I'll spend one day being resentful about it and then a long period sort of leaving it alone. And then I'll come back to it and say, all right, these are good points. I'm going to get into it. And then when I actually have my sleeves rolled up and I'm revising, that's a good feeling because I feel like I'm just improving something as opposed to creating something that I don't know if it's good or not. As far as once I was into the actual, funded period, I also really got a lot out of the broader impacts part. The high school students I had were all really great, and working with the high school teachers I found really rewarding because I could see them sort of learning about what we were doing in our project, and then kind of filtering that through their lens of how they could translate it to a way that would be appealing to students in their classes. And that was a fun experience to see. I would have some ideas. I'd say, oh, this might work, and they say, no, I would rather do it this way. And I'd be like, okay, great. And we took their lessons, actually shared them out with people afterwards, and then we actually gave them some of the materials and the equipment that they used in the release day, and just let them take it home with them. Certainly, having the ability to, work that stretch of time without worrying about additional funding at least right away, and being able to fund students over the summers continuously. Was a big part of it. Also just allowed me to have this kind of more uninterrupted sort of flow of that work. And then the part that I'm sure anybody in the Office of Research already knows about me is that I'm not great at those annual reports that are due every year. And I always wait till they tell you what they're due 3 months from now. And then when the 3 months shows up, and then they start telling you it's overdue. And then I start saying, oh, I should probably get around to getting this done. So that's just not a very fun part. And I always feel like it just goes into a black box, and so all NSF reporting requires annual reports through this kind of labyrinthine online system. You've got to upload and put stuff in different text fields or character limited, and you attach things, and publications have to go into a repository first, and then you can link to them. And they have to be PDF/A files, which I didn't know that they're archivable format, I guess. And so there's all this stuff that I kind of have to do on my own that is unrewarding, and whenever I complete it, nothing happens as a result. You just complete it, and then later a program director says, yes, I agree, you completed it, and you're in compliance. But that's a manageable task to do, certainly for the funding support that you get. And then the last part I'll say that I enjoy is just disseminating this information, whether that's at conferences, whether that's to high school teachers, whether that's in publication format, whether I was doing work at mining environments. So I would actually go and partner with the Bureau of Land Management and speak at town halls in the regimes where this work was being done, to kind of communicate with the public and show them photos of students out there doing work. And it actually helped to turn the tide against the backlash the BLM was getting from bringing government officials onto various people's property. And one of the funniest comments I ever got was somebody saying, well, there's no point in doing any of this science, honestly. Like, this is a big waste of time. The only value in doing this is that students are learning something. And I was like, I'll take the silver lining of that statement and say, okay, great. You don't believe any of the work we're doing is useful, but you're agreeing that at least students are getting some value out of it. So, okay, I'll take that piece and run with it. And I do feel an obligation. This is taxpayer money that we're fortunate enough to receive and fortunate enough to be able to spend. And so I want to make sure we're spending it well, and we're sharing out those results so we're realistic to populations that might be interested to hear about it.
I know there were a couple other questions in here on summer support. It's actually a really good question. Make sure to put in summer support. I mean, NSF wants to see that because it's direct. It shows your commitment and their commitment going to you as a faculty member. I'm pretty sure, and maybe Megan or Molly can kind of answer this, but I'm pretty sure it's 1 month that it's probably limited to. But that's probably about right usually.
I think it's actually 2 months typically for regular NSF.
And I'm pretty sure NSF funds can't be used during the academic year to buy out. So they're meant to be used during the summer. NSF doesn't want you actually buying out of your academic year time. And I know there's another question there. So I think the strategy around contacting program managers is always a tricky one because they're different among all the different directors. Some of them are, as Chris said, they're obligated to do that. Whether they do it or not is another question. And I think some are really good at it, some aren't as good at it. What I would say, a few things. One, many times you'll see multiple people listed there. So many times if you don't have that relationship with them, it takes kind of contacting multiple people to kind of get a response. Persistence, I think all of this ends up taking persistence to get funded. So whether that's following up with them or trying to continue to call them or multiple people. And then if needed, talking to someone in a different director, then they may end up telling you that you need to talk to someone else also. Sometimes that's an outcome from a discussion with a program manager, is they may tell you, well, you should think about submitting it to CMS instead of our program because it's a better fit, What other questions do you have?
Does studying the students that you're interacting with is that part of involving them in research? Is only conducting the research count as participating in research?
Like them being participants, you're saying?
Yeah, right? If the students are some sort of participants in the study, and then maybe later you debrief them and explain how the research was relevant.
That's a good question. I don't think there's any kind of set formula on this. I think the key is probably from NSF perspective is how is that going to impact, what's the impact of that on the students probably. That's probably the broader piece that NSF is going to be looking at. By them being involved, whether it's as a participant or a researcher, is there some impact to them as part of their education program or their developments or their skills development?
Right, and I would say if you are going to assert that there would be some positive or beneficial impact, that you provide pretty clear assessment tools that you plan to apply to actually measure that assessment, as opposed to just saying this will have a positive impact on them without saying how you plan to actually quantify and measure that. So either using existing surveys or describing the mixed methods you might use to get at that and so forth, what those deliverables might be, that would be very helpful.
That was a huge theme on the last panel that I was on. There are several of these proposals that were really great and people really wanted to love. They were proposing to do all these great broader impacts, but then they weren't proposing to assess them in any way. So assessment was just huge. And so, yeah, there's no way the assessment, the pre and post surveys that I proposed in 2013, that would have just been laughed out of the room now. You actually have to have some legit certified assessment method for your education.
We've got 1 more minute. Any other questions? I know that Chris, or go ahead, Matt.
So I have a quick question about collaborators. So I know that you have to be the PI on the proposal, but you can have letters of collaboration from various people. I was wondering if anyone had any opinions on the distribution of those, whether it's better to have collaborators from your home institution or from external institutions, or sort of how many is too many also, right?
Chris, you want to comment on that maybe? I can comment also.
I can imagine a program director's response, which will be similar to budget, identify the ones that you need to get the work done that you're proposing. Similar to budget, what's the right budget? Well, the right budget is the amount of money that you need to do the research you're proposing to do. So the right number of collaborators is the ones to actually accomplish the scope of what you aim to accomplish. And they're going to be no more specific than that. So then at that point, you're kind of just speculating on how it will land with the reviewers. If you have 10 collaborators and so forth, they're like, all right, well, if this is a career proposal specifically, you should be kind of the hub of all of that stuff. So have you actually established that hub appropriately, or is it kind of farming it all out? So I don't think there's a good number. Probably be helpful just to get a bunch of perspectives on people who read it and can ask a question ahead of time. Hey, does this makes to you in terms of their disciplines or areas or expertise, and does it seem like too many or too few, so forth. Having those letters of collaboration, though, is really helpful. I made sure to get them from the high schools I was working with, as well as a superintendent from one of the high school districts, as well as, you know, a couple of collaborator institutions I was going to be using resources at.
Yeah, I think in general, it's more of outside collaborators. I don't think of that as more kind of the people that you collaborate within the university. They probably already expect that you collaborate with people at the university. But if part of your education plan, you're working with high schools, or, you know, in my proposal, I was working with some federal agencies that manage water, and they were interested in my research. So, you know, having their letter kind of helped show the impact of it. I want to be mindful of time. Chris posted his presentation in there. I posted a link to the Google Slides I had also. Both of us offer it up. If you ever need to see NSF career proposals, feel free to reach out to us. I'm always happy to share that. I also periodically will read people's proposals too. So I'm happy to do that. I'm not going to give you a technical review, but I will give it from the standpoint of, does it sound about right or look about right? And I think sometimes that's what you need when you're writing these proposals. So feel free to contact me if you ever need some other eyes on your proposals. So any last comments, Chris and Jennifer?
Good luck.
No, none for me. Thanks for organizing it, Tom.
No, thank you for your interest, and thanks to Chris and Jennifer for participating. So good luck to you all, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Jen, great to see you over Zoom.